want to welcome everyone to our forum. And tonight's forum is going to be about housing, issues ranging from gentrification to homelessness to the latest .com boom and how it's affected the city and changed the city. Speaking on the issue of gentrification, in SF, Rebecca Solnit wrote, "All this is changing the character of what was once a great city of refuge for dissidents, queers, pacifists, and experimentalists. It has become increasingly unaffordable over the past quarter century, but still has a host of writers, artists, activists, environmentalists, eccentrics, and others who don't work 60-hour weeks for corporations, though we may be a relic population." Gentrification is not anything new in SF, but the current influx of young tech workers with money to burn is unprecedented. Tonight we'll hear from speakers who will address this and other issues of housing in our city across the board, like foreclosures, Ellis Act, evictions, and the fight for our city's poorest to seek shelter through squatting. Tonight we'll have speaking Ted Gullickson of the SF Tenants Union, Ayisha Pelpon of Homes Not Jails, and Matt Crane. To foreclosures, and he's of the Occupy BERNAL group, and he's also an economics teacher at Henry George.
Into the housing bubble, and that's when everybody saw housing as the next best big investment. And so we saw all of these, and in fact we saw Wall Street money pouring into San Francisco to fund landlords like City Apartments, which bought dozens and dozens of buildings with the intention of evicting rent-controlled tenants and then jacking up the rents. And we fought back on that, and now we are in .com 2, and the impact of that so far has been an extreme rising of the rents in the last year or so. So the average rent in San Francisco is now over $3,000, and there's great variety by neighborhood, but in the Mission, for example, a two-bedroom apartment is generally going for about $2,800 these days, a vacant apartment, because we don't have rent control on vacant units because we can't because of state law. And now what we're seeing, at first we saw the rents, and now what we're seeing are the evictions starting to increase. The biggest reason for these evictions is condo conversions, and the eviction that is used for condo conversions is called the Ellis Act, which is a state law saying you can evict all the tenants in the building if you don't want to rent the units anymore, and if you want to sell them as condos, then you're not renting the units anymore. So that's how tenants get booted out for these condo conversions, and we've seen them triple in the last couple of months, and we've seen landlords using the Ellis Act as a threat. We've seen that about quadruple, and so now we're starting to see the eviction impact of it. In terms of the larger picture of gentrification, when we're looking at gentrification in San Francisco, the most effective way of transforming a city and transforming neighborhoods are condo conversions and evictions. That's how I've seen neighborhoods change, because from the viewpoint of the real estate speculators who are the gentrifiers, it's very efficient, because what you are doing is when you condo convert, say a 4-unit building in the Mission, you're kicking out 4 low, moderate income people and replacing them with people who can buy apartments for around $1 million each. And those people are not the people who grew up in San Francisco. They're not the people working in San Francisco. They're people who have just moved to San Francisco because they take the Google bus down to Mountain View, and they, in fact, there's 3,500 people who take just the Google bus, and wow. And that's per day. And when you are replacing people, for low, moderate income people, typically union members, young people, people who vote progressive, or people who are buying $1 million apartments, you're not just throwing these 4 households out of the city. You're replacing them with people who are very, very, very different in many ways, both in terms of the businesses that they will support in the neighborhood. They prefer the high-end cafes, for example, and fancy restaurants, and they also tend to vote quite differently. And so we see a wholesale shift in sort of the political demographics of the city as we see more and more gentrification happen and the people like us being kicked out of the city and people who are very different from us coming into the city. And one manifestation of that just recently is the election last November, which saw the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco transform from a slim pro-tenant majority to a slim pro-landlord majority. And one of the most immediate impacts of that we're facing just a month or so into the term of the new board is a proposal from the landlord-backed supervisors which would let some 2,600 apartment units get immediately converted to condominiums. And I want to give a little background into how condo conversions happen in San Francisco and what this legislation means. It's at the Board of Supervisors right now. In San Francisco, we actually have a very good condo conversion law, believe it or not, but it totally has been subverted. And the condo conversion law we have limits the number of condo conversions each year to 200. And that's just one piece of it. Other parts of it say that before you can even convert a building to condominiums, you need to get 40% of the tenants living in the building to actually agree to that condo conversion. You have to get the tenants in the building to say, I want this building to convert to condos because I want to buy my unit. And then any senior or disabled tenants who don't want to buy get a lifetime lease, and any other tenants who don't want to buy get at least a one-year lease. And so it's a very controlled process, and this law was passed around the same time as rent control in 1980. And because there's a lot of money to be made off of condo conversions, the real estate speculators found a way around it in the late 1980s. And what they created was these things that you probably read about or seen called tenancies in common, or TICs. And what they are is a quasi form of condominium. It's not exactly a condominium. It's, take a 4-unit building again as an example. The 4 people who own each of the units own 25% of the entire building, and then they have an agreement saying, okay, for my 25%, I get unit 1, you get unit 2, you get unit 3, you get unit 4, and then once they're all moved, and the way it works is a real estate speculator buys a rent-controlled building, they evict all of the tenants under the Ellis Act, and they sell the empty units as these tenancy in common type condos. People move in, and then as soon as they're eligible, which is a couple of years, they apply to become full-scale condominiums, which is a much more secure and valuable form of ownership. It's been very hard for us to control these tenancies in common because of the various state laws and court decisions. And one way we have been successful at limiting them to a degree is by making it as difficult as possible for them to turn into condominiums. And it's very important for them to turn into condominiums, not just because the condo is more valuable, but because when 4 total strangers own a building jointly, it's pretty risky, because if one of them defaults on their share of the mortgage, everyone loses the building. If one's a doctor and gets sued for malpractice, they're all going to get sued if they go after the building. So they can't stay that way for very long, and they have to become condos. So we've made it difficult through various sort of backdoor mechanisms and prohibitions on condo conversions, that sort of thing, to become condos. And as a result, there's a pretty big backlog of these TICs trying to become condos, and it takes about 10 years for that to happen, which is a long time to have that form of ownership. So Supervisor Scott Wiener and Mark Farrell introduced a piece of legislation to let all of these TICs, there's about 2,600 of them, become condos automatically in exchange for paying a fee of about $5,000, which is like nothing compared to the fact that each unit will go up in value by tens of thousands of dollars. And that legislation has actually been introduced every year for the last 6 or 7 years, and we've always handily defeated it. But suddenly we're looking at it, the very likelihood of it passing, because we have a pro-landlord board of supervisors, and we're looking at London Breed, of all people, who represents District 5, being their 6th vote. It was going to be voted on 2 weeks ago, and we did our vote count, and we saw we were going to lose, so we did a postpone to February 25th, and at which point there'll be a hearing on it again, while we try to do something to either get it continued or delayed or get our sixth vote. But the impact of that, if that passes, is pretty much two things. The first thing is that it will say to the real estate industry that San Francisco is no longer interested in regulating condominiums at all, that we're going to just make it as easy as possible to convert buildings to condos, and in effect this, by letting 2,600 units become condos, that's over a decade's worth of the condo cap, it's sending a strong message that the condo conversion law is on its way out and condo conversions will be unlimited. That's going to create a wave of evictions for these tenancies in common in the next, immediately after that passes. In fact, the San Francisco Apartment Association in their magazine last month predicted that that would happen because they said that these buildings would become such a great investment. But the second impact of it is that in the form of a tenancy in common, these apartment units are all covered under rent control. And they bounce in and out from ownership to rental unit, as most condominium-type buildings do from time to time, as the market dictates. Is it more valuable to rent it? Is it more valuable to sell it? That sort of thing. When they get converted to condos, they will get taken off of rent control pursuant to state law, which is going to mean that the people who are in these buildings are going to have pretty much two lucrative choices that they can make. One is they can sell the condo at a pretty big profit, or two, they can just sit on it and say, I'm going to rent this thing, this doesn't have rent control, I'm going to make a killing off of these units. And by sending the message that San Francisco is going to make it easy to convert to condos, we're going to see landlords start buying buildings with the intention of converting them to condominiums solely for the purpose of taking away rent control from them. So we will, if it passes, we'll immediately lose rent control from 2,600 buildings that at some point, most of which will be rented again. It might be next year, it might be 5 years from now, it might be 10 years from now, but they will be on the rental market again at some point. So back to sort of the overall picture, it's stuff like that that is happening right now as we're in dot-com boom too. So we have all the market pressures of people with lots and lots of money who are wanting to buy units. And now we have the Board of Supervisors who are saying, okay, we're going to make it easier for you to buy units. And that's a sort of, that makes it, doesn't make the future look as bright in dealing with dot-com too. It means we're going to have to fight back a lot harder, especially because the internet companies that we're dealing with right now are not the pets.com, they're Google, Facebook, Twitter, and pretty well-established companies. So it's not likely that, at least in the near future, they're going to go belly up and rescue us as happened before. And the impact of that, politically and demographically speaking, is we did a forum here last year on gentrification, and we used Hayes Valley as our example and talked about some of the changes in that neighborhood. That neighborhood pretty much transformed during dot-com one, and I used to live in Hayes Valley, and when I go through Hayes Valley now, I don't recognize it whatsoever. I can get lost in Hayes Valley. And that also has happened in the Castro, which has had a huge number of conversions. And as we get more and more conversions and more of people like us displaced, we're going to see the voting patterns in the city change pretty dramatically, not just on landlord-tenant issues, but on environmental issues, on labor issues, and all sorts of stuff. And right now we have in the city, the percentage of renters is about 65%. When I say renters, that sort of also means the percentage of people who are young, the percentage of people who are labor union members, and that sort of thing. That number used to be closer to 68% about 10 years ago. And as that number goes down and down, if we let that number go down and down, at some point we just would reach a tipping point. And when we see elections, we're going to see like vastly different things happening in San Francisco in terms of who people are voting for and how they're voting on ballot measures. So it's very important that we fight gentrification, not just to maintain the character of our neighborhoods and keep them, the way we sort of like them, but really for the future of the entire city, because we are very quickly becoming a city, not just for the rich, but for the super rich. In many analyses, San Francisco has become what's often termed a super city, and by that it's meant that the people who are buying condominiums here and buying housing here are not comparing San Francisco to San Mateo or Berkeley or Mountain View. They're making their choice between San Francisco and London and Paris and Tel Aviv and places like that, and the places like 8 Washington, which people may have heard about, the very luxury housing development, which is going, hopefully won't be built on the waterfront because we're going to get to vote on it pursuant to a referendum. But those are going to become second homes in San Francisco for the jet-setting type of people who want a $10 million condo just because they're coming into San Francisco for a weekend just to watch the symphony. And so that's the sort of city that we're headed for. And as we get into this .com 2, we really need to start fighting back both politically but also on the streets and trying to stop as much of it as we can. And with that, I think my time's about up, so I'll stop there.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ted. That was great. I'm sure there are going to be some really probing questions. I hope you can hang out for me. The one thing I'd like to know is how we actually can get together and fight. So next we have Ayisha Pelpon. She's a member of Homelessness, amongst other things. And without further ado, I'll let her take over. Let's have a good hand for you.
Hi, my name's Ayisha. I'm a housing activist and artist here in San Francisco. I started my activism a few years ago in Vancouver, Canada, where I was attending university, organizing around the 2010 Winter Olympics, resident-controlled social housing, gentrification, the housing crisis in that city, criminalization of the poor, and other issues. I did this with groups via picketing, like tent cities, occupations, direct action, and like street art projects that I was doing. I moved to the SF Bay Area about 1 year ago and started working with Homelessness jails right away. I had heard about them when I was in Vancouver and was super into it. So I was stoked to get here and start working with them. I wanted to work with Homelessness jails because I felt like I was mostly doing kind of reformist-oriented organizing in Vancouver. That is to say that I was doing organizing that aims to bring about like moderate to radical social reforms to the capital state. But in that, it felt that I was sort of legitimizing the state by doing that. And while I believe this type of work is extremely important, I yearned for something different, something that would subvert the state and resist this capitalist system. So that's how I got to squatting.
Squatting bad.
I've spoken many times before about squatting, and he doesn't usually say that.
So in that light, I saw the value in coming together to resist the system in favor of revolution and the creation of a cooperative and collaborative network that can work outside of that system. Homelessness jails seem just like mix to me of both on the ground organizing, helping people squat day to day, as well as doing public protests and direct action. While I cannot currently squat myself, I spend most of my spare time and energy to assist others in getting housed through squatting. So you're probably wondering what the heck H&J is, or sorry, H&J is short for Homes Not Jails. Homes Not Jails, by the way, I meant to say this when I started, but I wanted to acknowledge that we're currently on occupied and ceded colony territory. And I also wanted to acknowledge that I'm not really here as representative of Homes Not Jails, like you can sense that I represent them. I'm just here to talk about my personal experience as a member of that group. So in that light, started 20 years ago here. Homes Not Jails is a non-hierarchical collective of squatters and allies who help people house themselves in squats. Homes Not Jails also has public demos or building takeovers where Homes Not Jails draws attention to housing issues and does outreach with the community. The collective is a diverse group. There's young and old and white, people of color, different sexualities, abilities, etc. And any squats that come out that we help to create are autonomous from Homes Not Jails. We do not govern or control any squats in any way. So in our direct actions, we do those in order to put pressure on the city to change policies like SAN and TIC stuff, and also just to bring attention to the public housing issues and to outreach with the community. My experiences with the last action, which was on 10/10/2012, which is World Homeless Action Day. It was in the Castro at an Ellis Active building that was obviously empty. It has a racist, classist, sexist, transphobic landlord. So we were calling attention to some of these issues. The pigs raided without warning 1 hour into the occupation. 20 people were arrested, myself included. The action was peaceful, and we got a positive response from the community as we were included outside. And actually, even the corporate media coverage was pretty broad and relatively fair and positive to us. So that was really awesome that our message got out there. One of those messages that we sort of as a mantra is just that nationwide there are 8 vacant houses for every 1 homeless person. And in San Francisco, it's something more like 3 or 4 vacant units to 1 homeless person. So, yeah, it completely explodes the notion that somehow there's just not consumption on up, supply and demand, there's just not enough housing. It's just false. Building takeovers are a great way to get involved in H&J as well, without obviously needing to be a squatter. So you might be wondering how gentrification has anything to do with squatting. But since squatting is outside of the real estate rental market, it exists outside of this monetary exchange and residual capital from the poor and working classes to the rich, the landlords, etc. And it's just not involved in this economy of gentrification. The landlord isn't spending the money that you are giving them for your rent gentrifying businesses and gentrifying projects like city condo development and whatnot. It resists the image change of the neighborhood, as squatters usually aren't seen like people walking you around who make you feel really safe if you're also white and a yuppie. So, so it does that. Resists and rejects these sky-high rents. I mean, when you're renting in a way where, even if you really don't want to, you're sort of approving them charging that much for your rent. It sort of legitimizes it, perpetuates it, and this rejects and resists that. And therefore throws off kilter the raising of the rent. Squatters have more time for community organizing against gentrification. So,
You're not looking for another squat.
yeah. Some reasons why one might want to squat. You don't have to have a job if you squat. You don't have to be a wage slave. It's empowering to have your own space on your own terms. You're not indebted to the state for your social housing and restrictions from your landlord, etc. You're subverting the capital system, and you're using what is otherwise unused in these social systems. Some thoughts on like what could be happening instead of gentrification in sort of an ideal dream world or something. I think there would be neighborhood stability where people would be able to stay in their neighborhood, have control over it, autonomy, resident-controlled housing basically is the mantra. I've been to Cuba and seen how often there's revolution, and now it's sort of like everyone's squattering and everyone's housed and there aren't homeless people, and it's really, really interesting. It's completely different. And yeah, mostly we need to have an expropriation of property and land back to the people who built this city. Working classes, people of color built this city. It was their fucking two hands, and we deserve to get back. So there's that. I want to take a second to acknowledge artists' role in gentrification, as I am an artist myself. Artists are too often the forefront of gentrification. They're, on the look for cheap rent for their studio, for their housing. So they move in. Next comes the restaurants and boutiques. They frequent them. Suddenly you've got this cool hip neighborhood, and all the yuppies come in. It gentrifies. Rents go sky high. Suddenly the artists can't even afford to live there anymore, and they're forced, into the next neighborhood, next frontier, whatever. This is really obviously not an interest of artists to do to themselves as a group. We're just going to have to keep skipping to the next neighborhood. We're maybe inadvertently causing this gentrification and displacement of poor working class people of color communities. A great way to subvert this is by squatting. So you can be an artist who squats your studio and squats your housing and doesn't, boycott the gentrifying businesses, etc. Yeah. So I'm obviously I'm not a squatter currently. And squatting is really awesome. If you're interested in squatting, I highly recommend you come on down for a Tuesday meeting. But I'm also here to say that you're completely welcomed as an ally to squatters, and you do not have to be a squatter to come home on sales. And there are lots and lots of ways that people can help squatters without actually squatting. You can support squatters by coming to meetings, hoping to look for potential squats in empty buildings. There's other, technical on the ground things you can help with. so to speak. And there's also the building takeovers, kind of public protest aspect that we do, that obviously anyone can totally help with, and if you're not comfortable getting arrested or being on the premises during the action, there's still lots you can help with, media and tons of stuff, food, etc. HMB is actually doing a lot of kind of other projects right now that can be helped with by anybody. Among those are, we are writing a zine that's like a 101 how to squat guide. So it's really thorough, and so that can be helped with, layout, printing, distribution, etc. We really want to increase outreach, so multilingual people are extremely useful or welcomed. And we're about to implement providing childcare at meetings, so people can help with that. We're also going to make monthly skill shares for 30 minutes out of our Tuesday meeting. I think it's going to be the first Tuesday of every month, I believe. So yeah, there's tons to help with. We have meetings at the HRC, which is the Housing Rights Committee, at 417 South NS, and that's Tuesdays at 8 p.m. every Tuesday.
Could you repeat that one for us?
Yeah, okay. 417 South NS. It's at 15th.
7 o'clock.
8 p.m.
8:35.
8, no, we're starting at 8 now. Yeah, we'll also be kind of redoing our website and other things, so that's all. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot. So, thanks, Ayisha. We really appreciate you coming here. Unofficially, we're going to there.
Yes.
I actually remember that you sort of did kind of usually. Last but definitely not least, we have David Gullickson. He was wears many hats. We knew him through the Occupy BERNAL and the great work they're doing in foreclosures. He's also a teacher of economics at Henry George School. And without further ado, David.
Great. The next bid is elected, that is, you can participate or not. You stand up and move in 3 directions and take a sample in that fashion as to what you think about property rights. So, if those of you, after you hear what I'm going to propose you do, then you might want to stand and participate if you want. I'm going to have those who recognize property right in labor, that is, in the value of one's intellectual and physical effort, to move this into the room. And if you're for socializing, taxing heavily labor, move this into the room. And I'm also going to be moving you forward to backwards and also to stand tall or sit low. And I'm going to be talking about land, labor, and capital briefly.
Could you just explain?
I'll say that again.
Just explain a little bit the first.
Yeah. And I'm not going to explain too much because I'm not trying to persuade you of anything. I'm taking a sampling of what your perspectives are, so I know where I should start after this one, because I haven't begun. I won't begin for probably another 5 minutes. Yeah, I'm talking, but I'm not. So what I'm asking you to do is be moving around in the room this direction or this direction, this direction or this direction, and standing tall or down.
And we're trying to understand what the categories are.
Right. So property right is the topic. Right. What belongs to the individual and what belongs to the community. So, yes, exactly. So I'm going to move. You don't need to do this just now. I'll give you the 3 directions and the 3 ranges. So if you're over to this side of the room on the labor heavy taxation of labor will be over on distance. Follow that? If you
Where does the tax come in?
And what
Tax comes in when you buy the product?
labor, any labor, this work, intellectual or physical labor.
Okay, so
Web designers,
you're talking about income tax?
yeah, sure.
Would it be like also lower, middle, upper class, would they all be
I'm
taxed?
going to lump them all in.
Okay.
I'm just getting a general sampling. This is not a test. You know, get it, but help me understand.
Let's go with this. Let's give it up and go with it.
If you move to that side of the room, you are in favor of taxing heavily, that's right, you're taxing heavily stuff made by factories, businesses. If you're in favor of untaxing businesses, you'll move to this end. So you may be, we're going to be in some area of the room, and I realize the people is problematic here. And maybe those who want to get tall for the last one, can stand on them. So if you are in favor of, and that's, so there's two categories. No tax of labor, heavy tax of labor. Heavy tax of labor, I think they said, get back here. Oh, of capital. No tax of capital. And standing tall if you are for a heavy tax on land, and sitting down if you're for a low tax on land values. Okay. Does that work out? No, in degrees, you need degrees. Sure, of course, it's just, towards that end, towards this end. So, first let's do the labor bit. If you're in favor of, what did I say, a heavy tax on? Light tax, no tax on labor. So this is,
No tax on labor.
individuals keep their value over here.
Okay.
Community, the state, government owns labor over here through taxation.
And then you have to decide, oh, we're going to do this first.
Yeah, we do one at a time, each of these. So I'll move you through so you'll get to be in these grades. So, of those of you who have moved, there's a sense of a light tax on labor, the individual keeps, and those who are down here believe in a heavier tax on work. Okay, and now let's do the business bit. So, if you believe in a heavy tax on business, we're back here. And if you're in favor of a light tax on business, we're going to go over here. Okay, so we've got light tax on labor, somewhat heavier tax on business. And I presume those of you who have moved at all, or are still sitting, or not playing, that's fine. The CW standard, what's the game is. And now, those lying, okay. And those of you who are, you're not going to like this one probably. Those of you who are in favor, maybe the other way. Those of you who are in favor of a heavy tax on land values back here, and those of you who are for untaxing, Marco Rubio, tax on a light tax on land values. Up and down, that's right, we're doing this three-dimensional, I beg your pardon, exactly. If you're for a heavy tax on land, you remain standing, if you're for, and then degrees in between, and if you're for a low tax on land values, you're sitting down. Yeah. And everyone here is not playing, or we are playing?
I'm not playing.
All right. So a light tax on land? That's what you're.
Actually, I'm not, I'm going to sit up.
You're sitting. Okay. Resume your place. I get an idea.
If I had a balance as good as his, I
Yeah,
could
you'd
stand
be up there.
Unfortunately, I don't, so I'm going to sit down.
Thank you. Take a seat again. Thank you for participating. So I'm not going to be talking about labor or capital. I'm talking about land, because my specialty is land use economics. And I'm going to be talking specifically about the effects of taxation on gentrification through or via the aspect of land values. And I'll begin rhetorically with two statements. No debt for nature is an objective. I'm going to assert that no debt for nature, meaning land, is an objective of the occupied movement. And I'm going to suggest that occupying land values is also an objective of the occupied movement. And I'm going to suggest that occupying, that is, socializing, communizing, putting to public the community purpose land values is in keeping with what I conceive of as land value. And I'll also argue that this will accomplish the occupying of land values through taxation policies, public policy, will end the current gentrification model experience, and also eliminate the mortgage foreclosure crisis, which is what Occupy BERNAL has directed its energies for. The Occupy BERNAL originated about a year and 4 months ago or so. We have, within a half-mile radius, 80 families in foreclosure, and we have managed to forestall 25 of those, and we have managed to have 10 of those otherwise foreclosed upon families in their homes and the land underneath those homes had their loans modified. We've had comparatively good success, and we've been a business, right? And comparatively with other communities, we're succeeding, but we're still very much in arrears.
I went to use a little kitchen over here and brought along a computer today. He said that it was a teaching device. I teach third and fourth graders by day. I teach learning economic materials to teach so I hands off on the show and tell. And in San Francisco, I happen to be a former TIC participant. I'm also a year ago a condo conversion representative. That's who I am. I'm now a homeowner in BERNAL. And what I know through the property tax, those of you who have never seen property tax, it lines out land values and improvement values. It tells you what, at the time of sale in any event, what land values are and what home values are. When the two other persons, I live in a vertical duplex, those who were living upstairs and I bought in 2005, and the property tax at that time was $2,000 a year. We bought for $1 million. The valuation, the total valuation because of Prop 13 was $275,000. That's what the property was valued at. That's the tax basis. In 2005, even though the real value of what we paid was $1.1 million for this vertical duplex. Because of the revaluation of the property tax at that time, we are now paying the two apartments upstairs and downstairs $14,000, right? More likely what the value is. That's the property tax as it's now assessed. And the rise, yes, right. And the difference between $275,000 and $1.1 million has nothing to do, or very little to do with the replacement value of the structure. In other words, most of the value of that $1.1 million is the land value. It's not the building value, right? That's what changed the value. And in fact, in real estate market trends, when one speaks of housing prices going up, one really means land value going up. Wood and lumber and copper and building materials don't change very much. You can go to a Lowe's down here on Bayshore and a Lowe's over in Fresno, and building material costs are not that good. There is a difference in labor costs, but again, not accounting for the great rises and falls, the ups and the downs in the real estate market. What goes up and down in the real estate market is location value, location, location, location. So real estate is something. And in San Francisco, my property tax assessment is proof of this, 60 to 70%, both in commercial sectors and in the residential sectors are land tax. Of the total real estate value, 60% or more is in land value. Only this much is in building value. And in fact, I don't want to dwell here, I don't have much time, but in the commercial sector, because of depreciation, buildings are actually, from a tax perspective, they're worth zero after 25 years. They can, with the owner of real estate, depreciate building value in the commercial sector by approximately 3% every year. So that at the end of the 27-year cycle, 25-year cycle, it's worth nothing. The entire value of downtown real estate is in the land value after 25 years. That's what someone put this in. At present, when you are paying rent, you're paying actually two values. You're paying for a building value and you're paying for a locational value. And you all know that here in San Francisco, you're paying dearly for locational value. In your mind, move the home, the apartment, the condo you're in, move it to Fresno into a similarly to downtown geographic location. And the price goes down. Is it because this
has gone down in value between San Francisco and Fresno? This is what's changed value. Here in San Francisco, it looks like this. In Fresno, it looks like this. The house remains approximately the same in value. The location has changed value, right? What that means is that the landlord is making primarily land income as compared with house income. In San Francisco, that's the case. The landlord is making land income rather than house income. Now, if, as the little demonstration meant to determine, if you in fact believe that land values, unlike private labor value, or we can disagree here or not disagree, but some will say, and others will say otherwise, that business value belong either privately or to the community, it seems that most in the room believe that land values belong to the community. Okay? And for that reason, these values should be taxed heavily. If these values actually do belong to the community, that is, with the growth of society, more people move to San Francisco, and those people having greater income, of course, that's why land values change in San Francisco. Very closely speaking, of the techies moving in, Facebook goes public, they become millionaires overnight. That income enables those who want to acquire land in San Francisco. That's what pushes up the price of land values. There is an economic school of thought, and I'm part of that school of thought, which argues that it's meaningless, it's simply deadly rhetorical to say that we ought to occupy land, that land values are created by the community without having a public policy that is in alignment with that. And a public policy that is in alignment with the notion that land values belong to the community will tax those land values. If you don't tax land values as a community, you really don't have any grit, any teeth in the notion of land values belonging to the community. Well, an interesting consequence of taxing land values heavily is to the extent you tax, and let's go to the extreme to demonstrate the point. If, from the landlord's perspective, if all the land values are taxed away, that leaves income only from the actual service provided. The actual service provided is the house, the structure. That's what's been built, that's what's been created, that's what is either maintained or not maintained. At present, with the very low tax burden of landowners, they have a great deal of income from land values, and they don't really have to rent this out. They're making income from location, location, location. A heavy tax on land values will remove this income and leave the landowner with a slum. Now, a slum can't compete for your admission with those who will improve this. That is, the landlord who's about making income is going to improve this. He will build more housing and certainly improve it. But right now, there is what we colloquially describe as slop income. The landowner has slop income, land values. That is, doesn't have to work for it. You're actually creating it. Your demand for location for living in San Francisco pushes this up. It doesn't push the price of this up. This is the same in Fresno as in San Francisco, very nearly. Very nearly. It's the same in Fresno as it is in any other town in the United States. This doesn't change value much. So a heavy tax on land values will, again, remove the slop, and it has an interesting further effect, many ramifications. One is, to prove a point, if 100% of land values are taxed away, and there ceased to be any income potential from the land value, you're following that. That means there's no sale price to land. To the extent you tax away the income of anything, you tax away its sale price. Just think of a tool. If I have a tool and I can rent it out and get $10 for it, you would pay me a sale price in order to now be earning $10 with this tool yourself. The income of that tool is what generates its sale price. But when the sale price of anything is taxed, the rent income, the income potential of anything is taxed away, it loses its sale price. What would you pay for a factory that would never pay out any income? Nothing. You would pay anything for something that would generate no income. Similarly, a tax on nature, on location. that was high enough to take away most of the income of nature for the private party, it would result in a sale price that falls towards zero. And what that means is there's no money to borrow to buy the land. You will continue to pay rent because the land does have a periodic value. It is worth something, but only on a periodic basis. So this model of heavily taxing land will eliminate mortgage debt for buying land. It will not eliminate mortgage debt for buying houses, but in my case, 2/3 of the money I borrow, I pay $2,000 a month in interest for the money I borrow for the land. I pay $600 a month for the interest for the money I borrow to buy the house. I would continue to pay approximately what I'm paying as a total mortgage today, but $2,000, not the interest, but nevertheless the payment, the rent of the value of the land I now am on is $2,000. That would be going to the city of San Francisco, as opposed to Bank of America, Wells Fargo. That interest on, I'm paying interest, $2,000 a month in interest on the money I borrow to buy land. And a heavy tax on land values will eliminate debt for nature. If that has any appeal to you, then I'm interested in the conversation, or furthering the conversation.
Just briefly, we're a little short on time, but could you just give us a quick rundown of what Occupy Bernal is doing and what you guys are up to currently?
We continue to fight closure. And we have recently blended with ACE. I'm sorry, I don't know what the acronym stands for. But it's the California, it used to be ACE. And the idea of blending with ACE was to enlarge our geographic service area, because we seem to have, as Occupy Bernal, we've reached those 80 families that we know are in foreclosure. There are more families, as it turns out, that are in foreclosure. But there are many families that, I'll repeat what conversations I've heard with Occupy Bernal, those who are on the front line, and I'm not. After the Bernal, I'm already educated workers, not working so often with families. There's a lot of shame that is folks who fall into debt can't believe that they were fooled by the banks into taking out a loan when they didn't know they couldn't pay it back. And so that's all shorthand for saying we, as Occupy Bernal, we've reached everyone that we can reach in the Bernal neighborhood. And we want to enlarge the geographic area and make this more extensive to the model of shaming investors as they buy auction homes.
No, you just,
No. I had a question too. That's all right, go ahead.
we're gonna do questions at the very end.
Okay.
So that's brief, but that's,
Yeah.
the work continues to resist foreclosure. There was a white paper issued today, evidently, yesterday or today, by Nation Star, which is a major lender, informing their downline sales force, realtors, about the AB 275 law that came into play as of January 1, which is a homeowner bill of rights. And some of that includes some very specific details, as to what banks, or we should say debt services, because they're not all banks, have to provide to homeowners before they can foreclose. In other words, it seems that upwards of 30%, maybe much higher, of lenders, because of, we can't get into detail here, but a securitized loan cannot prove that they own the debt. And this homeowner bill of rights now says that if the bank or any other agency wants to foreclose on a family, they have to prove that they actually have the original deed in hand. But because of the way that subprime loans were let out, they were securitized, they were divvied up into little pieces and sold as essentially on the stock market. There's no coherent, there's no piece of paper that says this lender owns this home. In many cases, upwards of 30%. And now, in order to foreclose, those lenders have to demonstrate, they have to reassemble 1,000 different investors. And they're not going to be able to.
So what's going to happen?
Let's go ahead and move on. Thanks a
We'll
lot,
have
David.
questions soon.
Thanks a lot. We really appreciate it. Thank you. So we're gonna do questions and answers. I'm gonna turn this over to Ethan, and then we'll have announcements after that. Also, you know, the Occupy Forum, we don't have a lot of expenses, but we do have some, so we're gonna be passing a hat here. We got $1 or $2 or 15 cents. You can, we've got a hat.
Can I put in a plug? Oh, for raising some money? For this program?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pay
I
the
live
rent
in-
for this room.
Yeah, I lead a walking tour in downtown San Francisco that takes up these issues of land value, and I will pay $20 to this group for every person who attends this program once or any time.
Oh, interested. Very interested. How does one? All right, I have your card.
Take it over.
Okay, well, I'll just briefly explain how this works, and then I'll let him be our first questioner. So if you could try to keep your question and/or comment down to about 2 minutes would be great, and also everyone gets 1 before anyone gets 2, like that. And we'll just do this till somebody tells me it's time to switch to announcements. So you're first.
So this, what we're doing is a group here, so if you have a
Right.
specific question for someone specifically, or just the group as a whole, we can decide it.
Yeah.
Okay. For this young man, Cross, my question a couple minutes ago was, you said they were putting 1,000 pieces together and they can't prove who actually has a piece of the deed, the chattel mortgage, whatever term you like to use. So what is ultimately going to happen to the homeowner? I could care less about the guy who was going to invest in it. And there were some big companies going around selling bonds in that type of stuff. 20%, and I'm talking about in 98, 99, and 2000, et cetera, and outrageous. The reason I'm aware of this because I have gotten a piece of mail and blah, blah, blah. So the question is, ultimately, I'm concerned about the little guy, who's going to lose his house, maybe.
So this is good news for the legal.
Thanks, I'm glad to hear it.
Because if the lender cannot demonstrate that it has the right to receive a mortgage payment, there's no debt. Now, they're not going, meaning the lenders aren't going to go gently into that tonight. No. So there will be a struggle, but it will also be very difficult for them to demonstrate that there's a clear title, a clear line of the title. If you've heard perhaps of robo-signing, maybe not, but well, this is what this refers to. It's just it's literally a fabrication of a single lender, but there is no single lender for many of these entities. I'm not saying most mortgages are built, but it's not a handful either. It's in the tens of thousands.
So, yeah, so I think you were next.
Did you have a question on this question?
I just was, all of these people, these thousands of people who put their money in, and you can't establish who actually owns it. The question is legal liability. Somebody put this program together, and if I would have put in, say, $100,000, just pull a number out of the air, as an investment, and it was going to get 20% back. I asked him, I talked to him, I asked him, what's going to happen? You know, I mean, how am I guaranteed that I'm gonna get this money in? I didn't.
If you're an investor.
I didn't put any of my money.
I know, but if one were an investor, so it's not, this sort of securitized loan model originated in the year 2001. It's now run afoul of itself, and so this is new territory legally.
It's new territory.
New territory.
Let's try to avoid that one.
Let's move on to the next question.
Yeah.
Do you have one?
I had comments that are related to this. I'm JJ. I'm also involved with Hometown Jails as Ayisha. And first of all, kind of tying into sort of a fun little story is we have quite a few squats. I forget how many we have actively right now in Hometown Jails, but I believe it's around 10. And we use code names. And we have one squat called the Lodge. And it has been in existence now, I believe, about 22 months, over 2 years. And the reason why is that basically the owners wanted to get this out. We don't know who the owners are. It's Southeast Real Estate is the one that's representing them. And they can't prove ownership, so that's why there's these 4 units that are on the edge of Pacific Heights that basically have squatters living in them because the owners can't prove it. Now, there have been some that have been evicted, but curiously enough, through law and bureaucracy and whatnot, only about half the people have been evicted. But it does show that when you're doing squatting, it isn't something that lasts only a few weeks. The general rule of thumb for us in Hometown Jails is that the average squat in San Francisco lasts about 3 weeks. It could be longer, it could be less, depends on how attentive the landlord is. Generally, landlords don't want you to be there longer than 30 days because then you get what's called residency status, where you're no longer a trespasser, you are a resident, they have to evict you. And I also wanted to kind of say, kind of partly tongue-in-cheek, is that as far as the description of dirty squatters moving into a neighborhood, I'm a squatter, and we are not, drug addicts or sleazy people or criminals necessarily. A lot of us, like in my case, are underemployed and are working poor, and that's why, because I can't afford Texas's current rents, I am squatting.
Okay.
And then, quickly related to that too, is that one thing that wasn't covered is that what we try to do, or at least as a member of Hometown Jails, my perspective is in finding squats. I try to focus on finding foreclosures because I feel that we're not hurting anybody much if it's a bank, because the banks are holding on to these properties until the market gets better. And so basically we try to find foreclosures in that sense. I also look at it as social justice, where banks have cheated people out of their homes through foreclosure. So therefore, whether it's sitting, like there was this one house that was sitting for 5 months that we discovered it was a foreclosure. And I'm not proud to say that we moved 7 homeless people into it, and we housed them for 9 months until the bank finally decided they wanted to do something about it and keep people out. So we generally try to go for foreclosures. I've lived in 2 foreclosures, and I'll be wrapping up, that have basically been curious. They've been owned by private individuals. One of them, interestingly, that's sort of like a soap opera, has 2 sisters that inherited it, and neither of them can basically agree on who should have it ultimately. Both of them feel that one of them deserves it and the other does not, and so it's sat. And the latest one that I was living in until recently, basically has been sitting vacant in BERNAL Heights for 2 years, and the family basically is letting it sit because they don't want to rent it out, and they're not planning on doing anything else with it, and the mother does not want to rent it out to one of the sons. So you get a little soap opera thing. But meanwhile, you have housing. It's a 2-bedroom house in very good condition that no one's renting. So yes, it is owned by a person, but we're not hurting anybody because they are basically not doing anything with it.
Thank you. All right. So, you have a question?
Oh, yeah, this is a question that I just wondered, in terms of the CIC and the kind of conversion, if the board passes this, I guess what's your assessment of the current management of the board? And if they do pass it, is there a plan to do something to respond? Whether it might be a penalty or I guess it's just another maybe more general question is, it does seem that in some sense, in San Francisco, we need to deal with funding increases as well as housing. And I think that the debate in San Francisco does seem that we need to think about what could be done in terms of zoning or doing other amendments to the land use that would allow for the development of rental housing to be involved. We don't have enough housing yet. But anyway, I guess.
Okay, I'll take the last part first. So, I mean, we need all sorts of low and moderate income housing in San Francisco. What we also certainly need is luxury housing, which is pretty much all that's getting built these days. So what the city needs to do, and has it as all their policies, is to build more both rental and ownership housing that's affordable for people of low and moderate income. But it doesn't happen near enough. What we don't want to do is, because we also, in many ways more so, need rental housing, what we don't want to do is cannibalize the existing rental housing stock for ownership housing. So we want to create the affordable ownership sort of housing, but we don't want to do that at the expense of the rental housing and the renters. And so that's sort of the crux of the whole debate is, do you protect the rental housing stock, which is the only housing that most people in San Francisco can afford, or do you let some of that go for ownership housing? When the condo law was passed, the wording in it was that by allowing 200 units per year, a limited number, it was creating a balance and it was controlled and all that, and plus it was theoretically giving ownership housing to people who were actually living in it at that time. But right now the conversions are just unlimited, unregulated, except when they get to that condo cap. So we're very much cannibalizing the existing rental stock right now. The assessment right now of the votes is that there's probably one swing vote, and that's Supervisor Norman Yee from District 7, who is actually trying to sort of engineer a compromise, and tenants are actually sitting down with some of the supervisors and the real estate people. We're saying things like, we will let this happen if we can have structural long-term limits on the unlimited conversions for tenancies in common, but it's very unlikely that there'll be anything reached on that level. We are looking at a referendum if it passes. That's where you collect signatures to put the supervisors' vote before the voters, and that's the main impediment to that is that you have 30 days to collect the signatures, so we would need to raise a significant amount of money just to collect the signatures, but it's very likely we'll be able to do that. The other side, the real estate people, ironically, threatening the supervisors that if it doesn't pass, that they will put it on the ballot, and so that we're saying bring it on, because every time they've had stuff like this on the ballot before, and if they do that, we feel pretty confident that we'd rather fight it with the voters than fight it with the Board of Supervisors. So there are backup plans, the referendum being the most likely one that could impact it passes. We also sort of relatedly will be very much discussing a recall effort of London Breed, the District 5 supervisor, who promised many times during the campaign that she would never ever do anything to harm rent control or tenants, and just a month into office is showing herself so far to be very much willing to hurt tenants and very much a liar it appears. So that's quite a few things that we're immediately looking at doing. Thank you. Okay, you, then Patty, thank you.
I have a really almost similar question, but sorry, just repetitive, but it's kind of different also. It's just, it feels like the housing rights movement is a lot of it's preventative and some of it's really permanent for housing rights, and we'll try to get just go to action. So in terms of strategy, what are some of the thoughts and feelings of the movement facing kind of like an unfriendly board, and the strategy being focused towards electoral politics and getting the board change ultimately, changing policy, or is it really just kind of like preventing eviction? Like, is there going to be something where there's going to be a overwhelming action to really look at some of the tax rate control, but like create that, and how do you do that?
to create a,
Yeah, like a fight back, you know, like we're asking for more than just nothing,
Right.
and like, are we gonna shape and create Mexico or something?
well, I mean, I think there's a couple of issues. One is the election last November was very much an aberration, because the swing vote, as an example, the swing vote that we're looking at in Norman Yee comes from District 7, which is the most conservative and anti-tenant district in the city, yet he's more pro-tenant than the District 5 supervisor, which has like 85% renters, and is like the most progressive district in the city. So that's just kind of weird that all shook out now as a result of some failure on the part of the progressive movement to unify in District 5 and stuff like that. But moving forward, I mean, one thing we have to remember is that when we had district elections in 2000, and we were able to get a very strong progressive board, eight of them, and we had a lot of victories at City Hall, that prior to that, for 10 plus years, we had a board of supervisors that had two pro-tenant people on it, Sue Behrman and Tom Amiano, and we had Willie Brown as mayor, who was very anti-tenant, very pro-development. And we actually get some of our best victories during that time because we just said, screw City Hall, everything we do is just going right to the ballot. And we had some pretty strong protection. So I think as a movement, we're looking at, you know, it's just very unrealistic to think we can get anything done at City Hall whatsoever. So if we do anything there, I think it will just be a setup for it to go to the ballot. When we take it to City Hall, let it lose, let it generate publicity, and then get it on the ballot after that. And I think, you know, I think as a movement too, we also have to look at some more grassroots stuff. Like one thing we started doing last year, and I think we did pretty successfully during the first .com boom, was as open houses were being sold, as tenancies in common were being sold at open houses, we were very successful with a campaign to actually shut down the sales, that we would picket them, and we did this at the end of last year, and we're sort of on a break during the rainy season, and we'll start that up again. But what we found is that when buyers are told, for the most part, when buyers are told that people have been evicted, they don't want to buy. And sometimes that's because they have strong moral convictions, sometimes because it's just a ticket outside there, and they don't want to deal with the hassle, but whatever. Usually when the last half dozen that we did last year, in the last year, as soon as we announced it, like on our website and Facebook page, it was just canceled. And, it was just unproductive. So we have to look at like those more direct action and ballot sort of strategies to deal with the reality.
Okay.
I just had another thing I wanted to tell JJ. I think this last thing is really good. I was homeless for a long time. There were very few squats. It was very scary. You know, I survived because I had a car. They didn't find a place to park the car. It was really awful. So, and I'm hoping that maybe that the collective living facility, people will learn how to live collectively, and then we can all get together and get into land trust, which is a very sustainable, affordable housing form that nobody's talking about. Our building just about bought. It was just that real estate guy offered my landlord a lot of money when we had to sell it within my existing buying. And I had some experience with the first with some of the early studies on the land trust, and it's building 8 units for a land trust. I've got a landlord. We're sort of safe as long as he owns the building because he's an okay guy. But this other buyer people, they're all out 5 units. And so I'm happy to report he has decided to keep it because we figured that this guy was going to make so much money on it. He's not a good person. But his family's owned it since 1906 or whatever. So it's way safe for us. But it's, you know, I think we need to start looking at the whole housing sector. Almost all the low-income housing is shit. Okay, and have crooks. Okay, Mercy Housing. They have the guy who was standing Mayor's Office of Housing gave Mercy all the contract, and now he's head of Mercy Housing. But imagine it. Yeah, and all the buildings, they're slimy, they've started pesticiding again, it's just, and there's actually a really interesting article, I think it's on Daily Planet, Ingrid Artisan, did you ever research that yet? Yes, it's very good. It's a pretty recent article about some of the numbers behind these low-income housing, people and how they're just sucking up money, they're stealing money, it's just bad. And on top of that, they're treating like children, you know, right? So it's really out of the, we're really losing it badly. And I think didn't Anthony just get another supervisor slot for one?
We did, but that was, she was already co-landlord anyway. So.
No, but who's coming, who's going out? It was Chu, right?
Common Chu from the Sunset.
Who's going out?
And she already voted against Bess and all the other progressives anyway.
Yeah, but you never know, but you should mention, well, anyway. But yeah, it's really frightening. We have gone backwards so fast. And I personally don't think there's much difference between money greed and you know, log just proving what he was told to, right? Because every between and money greed is really around person. But I think that there could be some leverage with money greed. If she sells out all her friends and they all get kicked out, she's running. It's not going to work very well for her. Okay.
Thank you.
Like, very specific question. What is that legislation what is it called?
The official title of it is called the Condo Conversion Impact Fee. That's the official title.
Because I don't know how much influence you can have with people, but it's really
Well, generally we tell people, and if you go to our website, sftu.org, it has all the supervisors emails and so on. And generally speaking, they're all politicians, and at some point they want to run for a citywide or larger district office, so they more immediately listen to their constituents in the district, they'll listen to everybody.
Great. All right.
Yeah, I guess this is for both Ted and Ayisha. So, what can we most effectively do? Like, is it to get out on the streets during the actions, for instance, when one's not jailed is happening? Is it to make phone calls to our supervisors? So how can we get involved in this specifically? And also selfishly asking my District 6, James Kim, where does she stand on this stuff?
I think it depends on what people are sort of interested in doing. For example, we have a group that is sort of like getting low energy at this point. There's something called Occupy SF Housing, which is a coalition of different tenant groups as well as people who are in the Occupy movement. And that group has always sort of focused on action stuff, but the people in that group were not so much interested in going to hearings or calling supervisors and stuff, but was very, very much instrumental, for example, in helping get the boycott the TIC open houses campaign off the road. That group right now is actually working on a campaign. We're about to send a letter off to Google because we feel that Google and the other internet companies need to begin mitigating the impact that their workers are having on the rising rents in San Francisco. And we don't want them to just like throw some money at some housing group. We want them to look at it the same way they look at it as if they're polluting a neighborhood. And that they're causing the rents to go up, and they have to include in their budget something to mitigate the impacts of that. And the greatest thing they can actually do, what we're asking them to do, is to do a tenant rights education campaign. Because pretty sadly, most tenants leave because their landlord tells them to leave. And the tenant doesn't have to leave. And if we just could get tenants educated with bus shelter ads, ads on buses, TV spots, whatnot. And as an example of that campaign, if they don't respond to us, then the next step is going to be to stop blocking the Google buses.
That's what we come in.
Right. So, so I think we've always seen the sort of Occupy movement as being very much a good force for that sort of direct action, and then any other sort of independent stuff that happens, like going Mission Anti-Displacement Coalition, that sort of evolved during the first crisis. That was a great boon to all the sort of existing tenant groups, which were sort of having to fight our own battles on this like sort of this natural coalition emerged from the neighborhood and just fighting back on a sort of different front was extremely helpful.
Yeah. I would say, obviously, I don't have the answer to that question, like what's the thing that would do the revolution or make reforms or whatever the goal is. So obviously, like what you're interested in should play into it. I'm generally attracted to things where I feel like there's a tangible change being made, and I like that about like Occupy BERNAL, where you see a family, their status changes, and I like Homes Not Jails because I see somebody who was in house before getting their own housing on their own terms. That being said, I think there are two really important things that are difficult with organizing to do, but are so super necessary, and those are on the ground, like education, outreach type organizing, just like leafleting, talking to people, like I guess recruiting people, educating people about what's going on. So like there was a radical like school, freedom schools in the 60s, and et cetera, et cetera. The second thing that's really huge that is overlooked a lot is coalition building of people of color. And that's, I think, especially important when talking about gentrification in San Francisco and Latinos and Black people, other people of color who used to live in the city. Some still do, barely kind of hanging on here, and it's totally important to build relations with those folks. Those things are kind of difficult, but super necessary.
Very good. How was that you?
I appreciate all the presentations and what you're doing. I was wondering if you'd like, if there are other things you would like to say about what is our overall strategy for fighting the further gentrification of the city? And is there any effort to try to get all the people and groups that want to stop this gentrification to work together so we're all pulling in the same direction rather than kind of 25 different directions?
I think in terms of and we have to sort of look at it as like a long-term struggle where dealing with this crisis, but once we get through this one, we're going to have another one. And one of the biggest difficulties that we have in San Francisco is that we've done a lot of good things here, but our hands have been very much tied by the state legislature in Sacramento and by the courts, which obviously are there to enforce property rights and have done a lot of good reforms in San Francisco. So one thing that has been happening that's doesn't have immediate impact, but will start paying off soon, is that a couple of years ago, Dean Preston from Chamberlain Housing Clinic founded a statewide tenant organization called Tenants Together, which is mobilizing different tenant communities all throughout California. And that's very important because it's a piece of landlord-tenant legislation in Sacramento. Well, we know that Mark Leno and Tom Amiano are going to vote for that, and that's just a given. And the people all in Fresno and the Valley who are going to vote against it. And so getting organizing happening there is very important for San Francisco. So that's one thing that's been happening. And to the second point, I think that's a very good idea. One thing, and we don't have anything immediately planned, but one thing that we have done as a coalition of tenant housing groups in the past has been to have sort of citywide conferences on different issues, sometimes not even on any issues. Sometimes we've had conventions that we've just said, okay, what are the problems people are facing? What's the issue that really needs to be tackled? And I think the timing for something like that is really good right now. But until we get some of the constraints lifted from Sacramento, for example, we can't put rent control on vacant apartments because the state legislature passed a law about 10 years ago outlawing vacancy rent control. So we can't do that in San Francisco because of state law, but maybe there's other things we can do almost similar in many ways to some of your ideas. Like one thing we've talked about is doing what we call an excess rents tax, where you have a graduated tax on rent so that if the rent is at some affordable level, the tax is virtually nothing. But if it's over, say, $3,000 or $2,000, the tax rate becomes 99.5%, so that you eliminate any incentive to raise the rent over a certain point. But those sort of like big ideas that we really need to get like everyone to get on board with and to be able to work on it. And I think at this point we need big ideas and maybe lots of people and kind of big plans.
Right, no, thank you.
Yeah, one step up from squatting would be land seizure. Is there ever any discussion of that kind of a tactic as was used in pre-revolutionary Chile, the revolutionary Cuba, Venezuela, and in China, in which the housing or the lack of housing for needy families, for whole communities, was answered by a seizure that later was legitimized by the local government. Is there any commentary about that kind of, and if totally nonviolent, this was not part of an armed struggle. This was simply the will of the people and the need of the people meeting and seizing the property. Usually, absentee landlord, usually someone that could not garner public support at all for the absentee owner, or 1% ownership, or the kind of misuse of property that was described earlier. It seems that, obviously that's very, very radical. Doesn't seem to fit with San Francisco as we know it. Nonetheless, I think it should be on the table, or as a solution to all of it.
So, I'll take it more than that.
So I just want to reiterate that Homestead Jails, we do occupations, and if we weren't automatically closed down by 50 SWAT team members with full-on regalia, weapons drawn, then we would keep that building, and it would become a co-op or a commune. So that's definitely where I hope at some point, if we get more numbers, that'll happen.
I assume some neighborhoods have seen less gentrification than others.
Yes.
What characteristics are helping prevent gentrification?
What did you say?
Toxic waste.
Yeah.
Crime.
That's not that powerful. We had a discussion at the tenants union way back when they were tearing down the Embarcadero freeway through the Hayes Valley, and some people thought, oh, that's a great idea, and other people said, no, that neighborhood's going to gentrify as soon as stuff happens, and indeed that happens.
Well, Broad Bay Realty, single man, and I think it was illegal.
A lot happened there.
I think the powers that be to fight for great laws, and I think we should start thinking like that.
So I think the gentrification, what doesn't gentrify is in many ways a result of that the real estate speculators are just busy elsewhere at a particular point in time. I think what does help is, in what we saw in the Mission, like relatively speaking, to the rest of the city, the mission went through the first dot-com crisis pretty well. And I think a lot of that was the community resistance to it. And I think there's real estate perception, real estate investor perceptions for certain neighborhoods, like the Bayview, for example, right now, where if they really knew the neighborhood, they would be saying, oh, this is prime real estate, but not so far putting their sights on it yet, but at some point they will. And what they tend to do is they pick out like pockets, like have people here heard of No Park? And did you hear of that like 10, 15 years ago? So what the realtors do is they pick a chunk of the neighborhood and they repackage it, and then they begin selling it. And that particular No Park is all condos and VICs right now. So it all goes in sort of cycles, and they kind of hover around each other. So when an area starts gentrifying, it brings in the rest. It's like a bunch of ants. Right, vultures, yeah. So I think community resistance, and then some sort of luck and all that, and good, sound housing policies certainly. Like the Tenderloin, for example, the protections for SOL hotels is very strong, and if they weren't very strong, all those hotels would have been long gone by now, and either would have been condominiums or tourist hotels and all that, but we have good, strong laws protecting those hotels, and that, of course, helps them out too.
So NOPA stands for North of the Panhandle, and I learned that on Friday night when I went to the restaurant. Okay.
Yes. Did you have a follow-up?
No, a different question.
Okay. I was just going to add, on the same topic question, people were here last week and listened to the panel of Green Action. All the folks who were here from Bayview, Hunter's Point, Hunter's View, they're definitely aware of this on the fringes and coming in. And I think kind of environmental justice working group with Green Action a little bit, and we want to get more involved with them and to really work in our cities and to connect up these two issues, because they know they've been pushing the Navy to clean up the shipyards and do all this work, and then they're just, doesn't take, pressing, crystal ball to know that behind them is going to be the real beautiful thing.
Right. And amazingly, it always seems to get cleaned up after the gentrified. Suddenly they respond.
Yeah, this is a question for both parties. Do you get any expert advice from outside? Are you able to tap into, say, help from a lawyer, advice about legal, or a political science expert, or a sociology expert? Are you able to get any advice from experts and so forth? And if so, how did you make those connections?
I've heard of people in homes not jails getting outside advice, mostly legal. I'm not exactly sure what the connections are, or I think I should keep it in public.
You don't have to give names.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people within homes not jails are knowledgeable just from experience, lots of experience, and maybe a expert advice in the past, but then now they're able to help the group through without constantly advice. Obviously, it makes sense. So, yeah.
And for tenants, there's a whole network of tenant attorneys who represent both individuals, but then they have been more active in legislative ideas, like draft stuff and things like that. And we have a wealth of experience in San Francisco as organizers and especially in tenants movement streets way back. So this seems like some access to good minds.
You mentioned the resistance in the mission during .com 1. I was wondering if you could just share with us more what that resistance looked like and what's happened to that now that it's not continuing.
Well, a lot of it was focused from Mission Anti-Displacement Coalition. A lot of it, the sort of direct action stuff, was focused on what we call live-work blocks. I don't know if people remember them, but they were very much part of the gentrifying strategy where these condo units that were built as live-work units, taking advantage of some loopholes in the building code, which made it cheaper to build, but they still sold for the same amount of money. And the Mission Anti-Displacement Coalition was very active in trying to stop in fighting them at like the planning commission, fighting them on the street, and ultimately got many of them stopped in mid-process, and then ultimately got the board of supervisors to hold a moratorium on them. And then there's a lot of demonstrations, and one of the very good things that they did, interestingly enough, and something that we're talking about how we need to start again, is there was just a lot of graphic arts and postering and stuff like that. And one thing that's very true with gentrification is like you see a street like Valencia Street that suddenly has gotten transformed, and people say, oh, this is like a very nice street, it's very nice. Well, if that street, it was like well posted with the pictures of the families who used to live there who got evicted and told their stories, then that's like another face of gentrification. So just community education, stuff like that, make sure that all the people in the neighborhood know what the streets are, and that you know, four-story condo building that's being built down the street isn't just another building going up. It has real, it's a gentrifying force in the neighborhood that threatens your home down the street. So I think that's why, and the developers, in light of all that, didn't so much want to go into the mission, knowing that every single project was going to be a fight at the planning commission and on the streets and all that, and when I put up with that hassle, I wanted to go over to sell the market and do the same thing with the same amount of money. So, just making life as difficult for them, even if it's making them spend 3 years to do something where otherwise the next year they ultimately just back off and find some other piece of property.
And what's happened to that resistance now?
Well, the resistance, and this happens with many movements, like back in the old days of Homelessness, it also sort of happened is you get these neighborhood activists who help form an organization, and they do great work, and then of course all the established nonprofits want to pick them up, and so the leaders of Mission Anti-Displacement Coalition are now working as directors of this and directors of that, and aides to boards of supervisors and stuff like that. So, I think that's one thing that any movement sort of has to, that's sort of successful has to deal with in the long run, is that your people are going to be picked away at some point because they're doing such good work. So really it just has to be emergence of new good people.
Do you think that the situation in the mission, in terms of the number of people who are undocumented versus during the first .com, do you think that has any role played? Do you think that there's been a change in that, and then that affects people's willingness to come out and do this kind of public stuff?
I don't think, I think those numbers have remained, well, probably haven't increased with the growth patterns, but I mean, one thing we found in the first .com boom in the Mission Anti-Displacement Coalition, that didn't make any difference whatsoever, and some of the biggest fighters were people who were not documented, and so that was really an issue.
I was going to say, I live right near the mission, and I think the mission is an area where there's lots of cafes and there's lots of community, so people work together, whereas I'm in South Market, and they shut down 2 cafes and we had no neighborhood left. So we didn't have any ways of, now all the new cafes, they don't support those anymore. So it really is working together, where the mission, everybody has a lot of collective stuff. is small housing. The other thing I wanted to say is, Emily is starting to sniff up the ass of the San Francisco Housing Authority, which could be absolutely disastrous to things like shut down the Section 8. You know, there's this whole thing of wanting to bring redevelopment now, housing authority. I have no doubt that he's really going to go after it because he's really packing all the deck. And that's going to be just one really dismantle the many decks that we want to start working with black communities and Latino communities. And that's the time to talk to them. A lot of them are in public housing. That's the only reason I'm not on it. And the other thing I want to say is I'm pretty much across the board really unhappy with the tenant prices. Having something happen where we almost sold our building, and I'm told I can't be referred to a lawyer until something comes along with an eviction thing, which is way too late. If we needed, on this one, we needed to get there when the whole none of us was still there. That was so irrelevant, but that's what all the tenant prices say. No, you can't have a lawyer until you have a unlawful detainer. It's too late. It's gone. And it's very frustrating. And if you're going to do education, you've got to make up your mind too, because everybody I talk to is different answers. You know, the different tenant prices. And what the schools are going to, you have to phone and all this stuff. I got completely different answers to really get. So, yeah, that was got to get better, and we're just trying to roll over it.
Okay, Linda and David, and then, yeah, you, and then we'll close questions.
Are there anyone else that has a burning desire to speak? Okay. Yeah, I just want to kind of follow up on what you said. When I first came to town, I lived in a number of SROs downtown. And, you know, the original, when you first come in, this glowing report that, you know, SF is this town that takes care of its homeless. And when you get into these places, they are absolutely disgusting. Violent felons right off the streets, problems with infestation, no security whatsoever, mentally ill folks being housed without any kind of care whatsoever. It's really a nightmare, and it just really hasn't been addressed.
But a few deaths in Cali and Sonata totally sort of organized and involved in the threat.
Cool. Okay.
For those of us that haven't been, very closely involved with the stopping evictions, like in Occupy BERNAL, I was just wondering if you could share with us a little bit more how that's happened. I mean, how much community built, in the larger community in BERNAL, and I mean, I think you said 30%. You've been able to stop, and just a little more what we can learn from your experience there.
Is anyone else here from if you want to speak to that, I'll prefer it, but I'll have to share.
We've done a lot of work with them.
So we, I believe it was December of 2011, is when Occupy BERNAL had its first meeting, and there were 100 people at 4 monthly meetings through 2012. And once we settled upon what we call door knocking, we were too close to go out and knock on doors that we've identified what foreclosures are imminent or in process. And we asked those residents, some of them are renters, some of them are homeowners, are you interested in fighting the foreclosure? And if they are, then the next step is, well, here's what we'll do. We'll show up at an auction, and that's one early process where we show up at auction at City Hall and literally shout down the buyers. But the response to that was to move the auctions elsewhere or not to give much notice about where it would be held. So that wasn't a long-term strategy. And where Occupy BERNAL and ACE is actually in negotiation with Wells Fargo, in negotiation with Bank of America, and through the evidence demonstrating that it's difficult to take forward bad press for, say, Bank of America or Wells Fargo, that it's worth their while negotiating. Now, this is just this is one reason Occupy Burnham case is because, yes, we're assisting our neighborhood, but this is no long-term, this won't stop because this is not what it is with the ambition.
Come on, we're going to go to announcements.
Yes, sorry, start closed.
Well, additionally, I'm not finishing that. For example, like if there's usually eviction, you probably want to. Well, like I believe in looking at this business for certain point, but say that the cops are going to have no sheriff's organization, please take up the I'm not saying that we should really try to do it, but I'm just saying that like we should also like sometimes I have a lot of experience with people on topic. Also, so like yeah, there's other ways to organize to stop eviction.
Thank you, Jonathan.
What's the relationship between foreclosure fighters and the same thing?
Foreclosure fighters are those persons who are in foreclosure who wish to resist. So that's just a moniker for those folks who, and Occupy Bernal is in San Francisco on the forefront of working with those parties, those families, those individuals who decided to resist being evicted. Is that sort of the generic term? It's just a handle for them.
I think some of this stuff's ongoing too, like the protests, I think are still happening weekly, right, with the auctions.
Is that still going on?
Yeah, he's trying. He needs more people. And you need a group of people to stop on one person isn't enough. All right, now we're on announcements. Okay, the first one, I might need a little audience help. Does anybody know the time when the 1 Billion Rising demo starts?
Yeah. There's an event in Dolores Park. So there are many events for 1 Billion Rising. There's the one that some of the state transfers are involved in. Is starting at Dolores Park at 11. Right. It'll be art and music. And then they're moving to 16th and Mission. They're targeting around 1. And then they're going to get to way to City Hall and the big gathering is at City Hall from 4 to 6. In front of City Hall.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say, but I didn't know all the bits of it. Okay. The other big demo that's coming up is on Sunday, and this is against global warming and especially against the tar sands, which are going to, if it goes through, it'll ruin Canada, and I don't think it'll help us much either. So that would be SF Rally February 17th, 1 to 3 p.m., the State Department Building, 1 Market Plaza. We are going to meet somewhere 6 to 9 on Monday and discuss something. And anybody else?
Are there any very brief announcements?
I'll recommend Occupy Burnham. People from Occupy Burnham can see maybe how that was rolled out. There's a huge edition happening. I recommend if you are interested, not only from the radical perspective, and you should stop the reach. You're probably going to have a booth. I recommend it.
Thank you. You and Pat, go ahead.
Pretty exciting. We're getting a resolution of the Board of Supervisors against NDAA.
National Defense Authorization Act.
Which town?
San Francisco.
Board of Supervisors.
Yeah. So there'll be a little bit of policing stuff tomorrow. Rally at 12:15, press conference at 12:30, board meetings at 2. We have I think 6 people. So apparently we're going to introduce it tomorrow and then put it on the calendar. The vote won't
we have enough directives that we see no reason why it won't pass.
6 supervisors, 2 brief Kim Avalos-Mar and compost. Maybe.
If you don't know what MDAA is, it's like, you know about Guantanamo, where foreigners can be locked up indefinitely without trial. This would allow them to do the same thing to U.S. citizens.
Right.
So, not good. Okay.
Yeah, well, if there weren't enough bad news, BART wants to throw certain people out of the BART stations. I guess they hired a bit from public transit. Private transit now. BART police, this was snuck in just one day last week in the bottom half of the paper, that they're having a meeting, the San Francisco one is at the Mental Health Board, Wednesday the 13th at 6:30 p.m. to a new law allows BART to prohibit individuals who have committed violent acts, certain misdemeanors or felonies, on the system from entering all BART property through a notice of prohibition. And it aims at individuals with mental health or the homeless. So it's really nasty. The BART, a private police who specialize in shooting people in the back. So this, if you go to the BART.org webpage, up in the upper right corner, it will take you to this. But there's one meeting in Oakland on the 11th tonight. We missed it. And in Contra Costa on Thursday, on the 8th.
And the one Wednesday night at 6 is where?
It's here. It's that mental health, public health building right next to City Hall, 101 Grove or something.
Yeah.
It's at the corner of Grove and Polk.
Thank you.
This is really nasty.
It is.